In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to implement the provider state management package within your Flutter application. Provider is an excellent state management package that builds upon inherited widgets, and it's an excellent choice for anybody wanting to build complex applications using Flutter with complex state management. We're going to be taking a look at all of the basics when it comes to working with providers, such as how to set them up, how to consume them, and how to update values within them, and notify the listeners of these providers of the changes that happen within them. Well, we're going to be building an application that is going to have two pages, a products page and a cart page, and there's going to be some state that's going to be shared between them, and a user who's using our application will be able to select products that they want to buy, and then these products that they actually select, this information will be reflected on the cart page, and we're going to be shown the actual products that the user has selected as well as a cart total. And if we go back and update our selection to be something different, then if we go to cart, then it's going to show us the updated information. To get started, the first thing that we're going to be doing is taking a look at the dependencies that we're going to be using within this project. The only dependency we're going to be using is the provider package. And as a side note, links to all of the resources that I use within this video, as well as a link to the source code, can be found in the description below. So feel free to take a look at it. I'm going to copy the provider dependency, and I will come back to my code base, and then I will come to dependency section and paste this here. Once this is done, I will let Flutter Pub-Gets do its magic and install the dependency, and then I'll start giving my application a test run. Our application is a very bare bones application. We just have two pages within our application, both of them being stateless widgets. One is the products page, where I'm going to be showing the list of products, and then another page, which is cart page, where I'm going to be showing the actual contents of our cart. And then finally, I have a const.dart file where I have defined a list of the actual products that are available for the user to buy. And besides this, there's nothing else added to the application. So we're going to be implementing provider from the bare bones. So to get started, the first thing that I want to do is just show you guys how the application looks currently. So for now, our application has two pages. The products page has an app bar, which shows the title of the page, as well as a link to go to the cart page. And on the cart page, there's nothing besides an app bar, which shows cart, as well as a button to go back to our products page. So let's get going. The first thing that I'm going to be doing is actually showing you guys how do you define an actual change notifier and what change notifiers are and why do we use them in the context of a provider. So to get started, what we can do is create a folder under lib, and I'm going to call this providers. And then here I'm going to create a new file, and I am going to call this file cart_provider.dart, like so. Now this cart provider is going to store information within it for the contents of the cart, and this state is going to be then shared between the products page and the cart page. So to get started, the first thing that we're going to be learning is what a change notifier is. So I'm going to create a class first, and I'm going to say that this is going to be a cart provider. And then I'm going to say that it's going to extend the change notifier. And the change notifier is basically a mechanism through which a class can update its listeners on the changes that happen within this class. So if the listeners of this class, which could be anything, and we'll talk about what listeners are later on, are listening to what's going on within this class, whenever something within this class changes, like its data or something like that, then this class can let those listeners know that, hey, something within me has changed. And then the listeners can do whatever they want with that information. They can rebuild themselves or anything else. So to get started, the first thing that I'm going to be doing is defining what the structure of my provider is going to be. So this totally depends on you, but since we are taking a look at the example of a cart, what I'm going to be doing is creating a list, which I'm going to say final. I'm going to say this is going to be a list of product. And you're going to say that where does this product class come from? Well, it comes from the const.dart file, where I have a list of products, and in that list, each element is a product class instance. So that's pretty much where this comes from. So we are going to have a list of products, and I'm going to say that this is going to be called _items. So this is going to be a private property, and I'm going to set that to be an empty list to start with. And then to fix this error, I will import from const.dart the actual product class definition. Once this is done, the next thing I'm going to be doing is actually defining a getter on the class, which will allow me to get the items that the user has selected. So I'm going to say that we will return a list of products, and this is going to be a getter. It's going to be items, and we're going to return _items like so. Then I'm going to be adding some functions to my actual class, which are going to allow me to manipulate this list or manipulate the data that's within this class, or the properties of this class, I should say. So I'm going to say that I'm going to have a function which will return nothing. It will be called add. And then I'm going to say that we will get a product passed to us, which I'll say item. And then what we'll basically do is that we'll go to our items list and we'll add to that the item that we have, like so. And then once this is done, since now the data within our class has changed and maybe we want to notify listeners of this class about the changes that have happened within this class, we are going to call a function called notify listeners. And that's pretty much it. Then I'm also going to add the ability to remove an item. So for that, I'll do remove, and I'll say that the same way we did before, we're going to get a product item, and then I'm going to do items.remove, and I'm going to say that remove the following item, like so, and this needs to be a dot. And then once the item has been removed, I want to notify listeners. So remember, if you do not call notify listeners, then the listeners of this class are not going to be notified and they would not react to the changes of the state within this class. So it's important that you call notify listeners if you want to actually let the listeners know that, hey, it's time for you guys to act upon the changes within this class. For example, in the case of a widget, it might rebuild. Once this is done, I'm also going to create another function. It will also return a void. I'll say it's going to be called remove all. And what this is going to do is that it's going to remove everything from my items list. So this will be items.clear. And then similarly, we will do notify listeners. And the final thing that I'm going to be doing is setting up a function which will return to me the total of the items that are within our cart. So for this, I'll say that we will have a function that will return a double to us. I'm going to say that it's going to be called getCartTotal, like so. And once this is done, I'm going to do the following. I'll take the items list, I will fold it. So what the fold function basically does is that for each of the elements, it goes through them and it combines them into a single value. So for the fold, I have to give it an initial value. The initial value is going to be 0. So our sum is going to start from 0. And then after that, what we'll do for each element is that we'll take the previous value and we'll add to that the item that we get. So this element can be item dot, and then we have price, like so. And what items.fold will eventually do is that it's going to go through all of the items within our items list, and for each of them, it's going to take the item's price and add that to the running total that it already has, and then at the end, it'll return that sum to us. So I'll do command save, and now our cart provider is set up. So now that we have a ChangeNotifier set up, this exists within our application, but it's just a definition for now. We haven't instantiated an actual instance of this, so our application doesn't have access to it. So now what we're going to be doing is taking a look at another thing that actually comes from the provider package, which is a ChangeNotifierProvider, and what they actually are and what they allow us to do. So ChangeNotifierProvider, as the name suggests, is a class which provides an instance of a ChangeNotifier to its children. Some of you might still be confused with what an actual ChangeNotifierProvider does, or what does it mean that it provides an instance of a ChangeNotifier to its children. I'm going to be demonstrating this by using an image. So ChangeNotifierProvider does exactly what's being shown in this image. So if we wrap this ChangeNotifierProvider class on top of a widget tree, which could be the complete applications widget tree or just a part of the applications widget tree, then whatever is underneath of this provider will have access to this provider, is going to be able to read from this provider, and potentially is also going to be able to update values within this provider. So the way this basically works is that in order to consume a provider, or in order to interact with a provider, the widget that's going to be interacting with the provider needs to be underneath of the provider in the widget tree. So in this example, you can see that we have a provider which wraps a widget. This widget has multiple children underneath of it, which are widgets. So any widget beneath this provider is going to be able to access the value of this provider or any providers that are above it. If this provider didn't exist here, but actually existed underneath of this consumer, let's just say, then this widget, this top level widget, would not be able to actually access the information from the provider. But in this case, since our consumers here, which you could think of as widgets as well, exist underneath of our provider, they're able to interact with the provider and read values from it. So let's get back to coding now. So what I want to do is that I want to share this state and allow both of my pages to have the ability to interact with the cart provider. So for that, what I'll do is that I am going to come to my main.dart file, and then I am going to be wrapping my app class with an actual ChangeNotifierProvider. So to do that, I will refactor it, and I'll say that I'm going to wrap this with a widget. The widget in this case is going to be a ChangeNotifierProvider, and this comes from the provider package. Then this ChangeNotifierProvider is going to have a child property, which is going to be my app. And then once this is done, what I'm now going to be doing is actually telling the ChangeNotifierProvider what ChangeNotifier is it going to be instantiating, and then providing that to its children. So for that, what I'll do is that I am going to say that we are going to have a create property, which is a function where we get the context, and then we need to define what happens or how do we create an instance of a ChangeNotifierProvider. So here I'll create an instance of a card provider like so, and initialize it. So now our card provider is going to be available to the My App widget and anything that lives underneath of that, which in this case are our products page, our cards page. Since they're part of the material app, they're underneath of it. So with this done, now I've practically set up my provider. So if I do command save on my application and restart my application, you are going to see that nothing's broken, so we can move on to the next step. So now, how do we interact with this provider? How do we interact with this ChangeNotifierProvider? Well, there are a couple ways of doing this, and I'm going to be showing you two ways. One is by using a consumer widget, and then the other is by using provider.auth. So we're going to be taking a look at both of them. So to get started, let's firstly take a look at the second thing that I talked about, which is how to access a provider by doing provider.auth. So let's get into it. So I'll go to my pages and I'll come to my products page. And here, the first thing that I'm going to be doing is building the UI. So to build the UI, what I'm going to do is that I'll come to the build UI function, and instead of returning an empty container, I will return a listview.builder. Then my listview.builder is going to require two things. It requires an item count. So how many items it is going to build? Well, this is going to be the products that we get from the const.dart file and the length for them. And then it's also going to expect an item builder, which is how it's going to build each of the items within this list view. So for each of these items, what I'll do is that I will return a list tile for now, like so, and do command save and make sure that nothing breaks within our application. Once this is done, I'm going to add some properties to my list tile to define what they actually are. So the leading property for the list tile is going to be a container, and then the text is going to be product.name. So to access the product, what I'll do is that I will create a variable product. I will call this product, and this is going to be equal to the products list and then the current index like so. And if we do command save, now the list is being rendered. So now what I want to do is actually implement a checkbox on the trailing edge of the list view, or the list tile, I should say, so that I can select products that I want to add to my cart. So to do that, after the title, I will say trailing property, and this is going to be a checkbox. But the value for this checkbox actually depends on whether we have this item within our items list in our cart provider or not. So how do we do this? Well, if we want to determine the value for this checkbox, we need to check, is this item within the list of items within our cart provider? So to do that, we need to read our provider. So let's take a look at how do we read our provider. So at the top of my build UI function, I'll say that I'll define a variable which will store a reference to my cart provider. It's going to be of type cart provider, and I'm going to say cart provider like so. And then to access the cart provider from the widget 3, I'm going to do provider.auth. And then here I will say cart provider like so. And then I will pass the context to this function like so. So what provider.auth is basically going to do is that it's going to go up the widget 3, and it's going to try to find a provider of type cart provider. And the first ever instance of this cart provider that it finds, that is what it's going to return to us. So if you have multiple cart providers for some reason within your widget tree, then the first one that it counters is going to be one that's going to be given to you. So now that this is done, I will take this cart provider and I'll come to my checkbox. So determine what the value of the checkbox is going to be. So whether it's a tick box or not a tick, what we're going to do is that I'm going to do cart provider dot items, and then from here I'm going to do dot contains. So if the item contains the product that we are currently looping over, then the value for this is going to be true, otherwise it'll be false. And then once this is done, I will also define the onChanged parameter. So onChanged is going to be called every time we tap on the checkbox. We are going to be given a value, and then we will determine what we do onChanged. So I'll do command save, and as you can see, since none of the items for now have been added to our cart provider's item list, then none of them are checked. So if I click on them right now, nothing's going to happen because one, we're not handling the logic of what happens when the checkbox gets clicked on. And also we're not adding anything to our cart provider. So now let's take a look at how can we fix this. So what I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to saying if the value is going to be true, then what I'll do is that I'm going to do cart provider dot add, and then I'm going to pass the product like so. And since within add, not only do we add the item to the items list, but we also call the notify listeners, then this is automatically going to update the state. And else if this is not the case, then what I'll do is that I'll take the same function, but instead of doing add, I'll do remove and do command save. So once this is done, let's give it a test run. So now if I go to my products list and I click on one of these, as you can see, we call cart provider.add, it adds this product to the items list. Then we call notify listeners, which notifies all of the listeners that are listening to this specific change notifier about the changes that have occurred, and then the widgets rebuild themselves. And this is how a provider works in essence. So now that this is done, our products page is completely done. We can select products that we want to add to our cart. And once we have added these, then I want to go to my cart page and actually see the items that I've selected and the total for them. So let's work on that now. So to do that, firstly, I'll come to my cart page and I'll close down all of the other files. And in my cart page, I'm going to be using the consumer widget to consume the provider instead of doing provider.off. And this is just another way of interacting with providers. So in my build UI function, what I'm going to be doing is that instead of returning a container, I'm going to return a consumer widget. For the consumer widget, we need to define what type of an actual provider it's going to be consuming. So in this case, it's going to be cart provider, like so. So it's going to do the same thing as provider.off, where it's going to go up the widget tree, try to find an instance of the cart provider, and then make that available to its children. Then once this is done, I'm going to define what actually happens for this consumer. But before that, let's import provider. So for this consumer, we need to define firstly the builder function. And the builder function is going to take three things. It's going to take in a context. It's going to provide us with the provider, which we can use to interact with it. And then it's going to give us an optional third parameter, which I'm going to ignore by using an underscore. And then this function is going to return a widget, which will be rendered on the screen with the information that we access from the provider. So I'm going to return a column, and that's pretty much it. And then I will set some children for this and do command save. So the first thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to have a sized box as the first actual child for this column. So I'm come and paste that in here like so. And once this is done, the child for the side box is going to be a list view, and specifically the builder function like so. And once this is done, I will add the remaining brackets just to make sure that there's no error. So for the item builder, it's going to be the same thing. We're going to cut a context and an index, and then we will return a list tile for each of the elements like so. But our list view.builders, if you remember correctly, expects an item count. So this item count is actually going to come from our provider because we are just going to be showing the items that exist within our cart. So for that, I'm going to do provider. And remember, this is the provider that gets provided to us in this builder function. So provider, and then it's going to automatically understand what type of provider it's going to be. In this case, it's cart provider. And then we can access the properties on it, such as items.length, and do command save. And then for the list tile, it's going to be pretty simple. All I'll do is add a title, which is going to be text product.name. And then the product, we're going to access it the same way by creating a variable of type product. And it's going to be the item at the specific index. And also I'm going to import the definition for the product from const.dart. So once this is done, you can see that now the actual items that we've selected and added to our cart are being shown on the cart page. So the last thing that I want to do is actually display the total for these actual items. So to do that, I'm going to add a widget after the size box, which is going to be a text widget like so. And this text widget is going to say cart total, and then a space, and then a $sign. And then what I'm going to do is actually display the actual cart total. So to do that, I'll interpolate the value within the string by doing $sign and then opening up curly brackets. And within this, I'm going to do provider and then dot, and I'm going to call the function get cart total like so. And if I do command save, you're going to see that the cart total is now being shown to us. So let's just say that I want to remove items from my cart, not only from the products list by clicking on these checkboxes, but also from here by maybe long presses on each of these items. So if I long press one of these items, it removes them from the cart. So to do that, what I can do is that on my list tile, I can define a function on long press callback. And I can say if a list tile gets on long press, then do the following. Do provider dot remove and remove the specific product and do command save. So now if I hold one of these, it's going to remove them. It's going to update the cart total automatically, since within our remove function we called notify listeners. So the UI rebuilds. And if we go to our products page, it's going to do the same thing, because the products page is also listening to the changes that are happening within our cart provider. It's also going to rebuild itself and show us the updated UI. And with that, that's pretty much for today's tutorial. Remember, if you want to learn more about Provider, I'll leave links down in the description below to some good learning material which you can read to understand more about Provider. But this is going to be a sufficient enough starting point for you to build upon and enhance your knowledge. As always, if you enjoyed the video, then please don't forget to leave a like on the video and subscribe to my channel so that you get notified every time I release a video. And stay happy, stay healthy, keep learning, keep growing, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.